All right, folks, welcome back to the latest installment of our League podcast series. I am Adila Most Dirty, who you are cursed with today as your host. However, we have a much better lineup for our guest today. We're going to be talking about Taliyah. Taliyah?
Taliyah.
Okay, Taliyah. Thank you, guests. Already doing a great job. We are blessed with members of essentially the DNA team, as we call them for the Taliyah pod, that representing design, narrative or writing, and art. We've got one rep from each of these. We're going to go through and introduce them, and then we'll be diving into the behind-the-scenes story on the development of Taliyah. What is her title again?
The Stoneweaver.
The Stoneweaver. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So first up, representing art, we have. I'm gonna do my best here. We have
Go for it.
Willem van der Schyf.
That's pretty good.
Okay, awesome. All right, and you actually also have a terribly hard to pronounce summoner name as well, right?
Yes.
What is that?
It's pretty easy for me, but so it's Riot Tokkelossie.
Okay, yeah, I assure you it's 13 letters and it's not actually easy to pronounce. But what do you do?
So I'm the art lead for Champ Blue Pod as well as the 3D character artist.
Got you. And you have the fun challenge today of speaking for the 10 artists or so that I'm sure are on each Champ pod.
It's a big group of artists and they all contributed to the development. I'm only here to relay some of the development process.
How magnanimous of you. And of course, on design, we have Daniel Z. Klein, ZenonTheStoic. How did you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Hello. I'm a champion designer. So the way I like to explain that to people is I decide what happens when you press the buttons. It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's basically what I do. So I'm the guy who scripts stuff up and decides what the champion should be doing. I've been at Riot for, I'm coming up on 6 years now. Some of you listening to this may remember me from my shoutcasting days back when I did season 1. At some point I decided I should probably no longer be on camera, no longer pretty enough. So podcasts are ideal for me. Yes.
Anyone who's seen your hair and your beard knows
Wow.
that is not the case.
Yeah, so I've been a champion designer for 3 years now. I have worked on Lucian, Azir, and Tahm Kench. I am very sorry.
All totally uncontroversial champions.
Absolutely. The most vanilla, middle-of-the-road champions
Loved
ever
by
made.
everyone.
Yeah.
So I actually missed that. Willem, what are some of the champions you've worked on in the past?
So I also worked with Daniel on Tahm Kench, and more recently we worked on Alawi.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's actually kind of a fun thing I know we're doing. We'll get to in a second. Sorry, Ariel. Side note is that I know that we're getting this more and more over time is kind of the idea of like permanent rotating pods. So you folks tend to be working together with a lot of the same folks as you rotate from a champion that's finally rolling out to kind of the next one down the line, correct?
That's right, yeah. So we have 2 designers per pod and then a dedicated narrative writer and a dedicated art group that works together.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's got to be great for long-term continuity. All right, on to Ariel Lawrence, who is representing narrative. That's writing for some of you folks out there. Story or lore last for some of you folks out there as well. I believe your summoner name is Thermal Kitten.
That's right.
What's the background there? Why?
I have a thing for like soft, cuddly kitty cats.
Okay.
That's,
okay. So it's not like
hot ones.
fire kitten so much as warm
Well,
kitten.
I did start playing Annie, so I do have maybe a little pyromedia in my history. So
Gotcha. Okay.
Keep that.
What's your background here? I know you're relatively newer to the company.
Should I talk about where I was before I came here?
You can, absolutely, for sure.
I've been at Riot since the end of last July, and Taliyah is my first champ, and my first champ with Blue Pod, and I'm very excited. But before that, I was at Sony Santa Monica Studios for 11 and a half years, and I worked on 4 of the God of Wars. So it's been a long time there.
That's awesome. I did not know that. Okay.
Ariel knows a lot about Greek mythology and how to kill it.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Probably too
It's
much.
very important.
She's pretty much like Kratos.
Yeah,
She's
okay.
kind of very thematic.
How many heads did she rip off? Because that's how you kill things. I'm remembering this one cutscene where he fights like Helios or something, and he rips his head off in the most horrifying. I can't remember who it was actually. I did notice something fun in there. You said that you guys are Blue Pod. Yes,
Yeah, that's right.
How much better is Blue Pod than Red pod?
12 times better.
Okay. Good.
Blue pod, best pod, I believe, is our motto.
There we go. Okay. All right, good
so,
stuff.
yeah.
We had to get that out there for those folks. Okay, so we are going to jump in and just talk essentially about just how Taliyah came to where she is hitting PBE just recently. It's such a cool thing how each champion has their unique journey. You know, there was Azir, who you mentioned also working on, who was in some form of work.
Flawless.
Yeah. You know, that happens after being in some form of work for like 2 years, I think it was, from the very earliest conception. Whereas others, tend to come out much more quickly. And again, they each have their own unique journey. I know in this case, what surprised me is that I kind of offhand had picked up a lot less on Taliyah just from hearing around the office than I'm used to with some other champs that have come out. I don't know particularly why that is in this case, but I'm definitely interested in diving into the details. So can one of you tell me what was the original genesis of this idea? I know that sometimes it's like, oh, we have a gameplay idea, a guy with 2 guns, or a bird who commands sand, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm going to tell you a boring story.
Okay.
I'm sorry. This one was a very, very smooth production scale. There were obviously a couple of obstacles in the way that we did overcome, but the genesis of it was something we call fantasy slotting. So we look at champions that we have released or will have released by the time the champion that we're making comes around. We're like, hey, we haven't made X in a while. And most of our champions start with fantasy slotting. There's some examples, some exceptions where Aurelion started out with, well, we had this idea for our Shin a while ago, and we sort of promised people that
was a weird one.
Yeah, but normally it's fantasy slotting. In this case, it was like, well, we should do a mid laner. We should do an actual traditional magey mid laner.
So it's kind of role rotation to some extent, where we're like, okay, we should probably do another mage.
Sometimes it's role. Sometimes it's like, hey, we haven't made a monster in a while, or maybe we haven't made, I don't know, a positive, optimistic, upbeat champion in a while, which sort of is true with an arrogant space dragon and a mass murderer and a tentacle god priestess in the past.
That's super interesting because it sounds like there's basically a couple different axes between like gameplay style, fantasy, the role that the champion is played in, like all of these things, and they're all kind of on rotators. And it seems like to some extent it's almost kind of like, all right, what haven't we done in a couple of these ways to be kind of trying something new? That's how that was essentially her genesis. It sounds like.
I think that's kind of how it starts, but I think there's definitely room as what we call the ideation process, where we take those ideas and we talk them out throughout the pod, and we kind of see what is the most interesting, what's the most compelling gameplay wise, like art wise, what can we do with this? What's the interesting story that we can tell there? And if something evolves from that is different potentially than where we started, I think the champion team's always been open to pursuing what is the best thing we can do for the players. Like what can we do that's awesome, not what did we set out to do.
Very clear example of that. Tom Kent started out as, hey, we haven't made a top lane tank in a while. Halfway through his development, we're like, you know what? Eating allies is a lot of fun. And once again, I am sorry. And we decided that as somebody who wants to eat allies, it just makes a lot of sense for him to eat allies from the very beginning so he can learn how to do it, which means, well, he's now a support.
He's not eating allies enough. We need more of that.
Exactly. That's how I feel, at least.
This is amazing.
So we pivoted in that case. We're like, well,
Gotcha.
We'll still get like a secondary tank, but he needs to be a support because that's what his kit does best.
Okay. So what was the first time where you kind of, in retrospect, found the genesis of what would look like Taliyah? Where did that come from? Where it was like, okay, you got beyond, all right, we're making a mage, or even we're making, a mage who's going to manipulate Earth, and then you found that kind of earliest visual look that would come to where we are.
So normally this is something that I'd like Willem to talk about, but this is because it's art. Actually, it came from a piece of art, but I am such a fan of this piece of art. So I am generally, as a rule, a huge fanboy of both art and narrative disciplines. And
You'll be a good hype man for this.
Man. It's so good.
You don't strike me as a fanboy at all, Daniel.
No. I do play video games and I'm a nerd. So Evan Montero was so he's an illustrator here at Riot. Is that correct? Illustrator?
He's the splash artist for Champion Team. So
Yep, gotcha.
As of couple of splashes or a couple of champs ago, he's going to be the dedicated splash artist for most of the splashes that come out of champ.
So we have him to thank for that awesome splash art.
Yes, absolutely. So we sat down as a pod in very early ideation. We're like, okay, we're making a mage. What kinds of archetypes are there for mages? And we very, very quickly narrowed it to, we want to make an elemental mage. And I think the two that were top in the running at the time were Earth Mage and Lightning Mage. And Evan was like, well, okay, let me just knock some of those out. And he made this lineup of 5 characters. I hope that we will get the concept art into the Insights piece, which will be out sometime after this podcast. He made a lineup of 5 characters, and one of these he gave each of them a nickname. And one of them was nicknamed Stoneflower. It was this even younger than Taliyah, younger girl, like a headband kind of thing, and she's standing in this circular, sort of like woven-looking stone impression, and she had these little fragments of rock orbiting her arms. And I'm looking at this now with Taliyah finished, I'm like, we were 80% of the way there the first time he did anything. And I remember me coming into the next ideation session saying, well, guys, we're done here. This is like a week into ideation. Like, this is it. We're making this.
We're making X the Stoneflower. Okay.
Right. And a couple of the other, the Tectonic Marvel was another one of those. We took a little bit of that. And then we had the Thunderbird, which was like a take on a young girl Lightning Mage. We didn't take any of that concept other than the pose that she's in that piece.
Hey, that's something.
Is exactly Taliyah's run pose. Like if you see her with the long sleeves even, like from day one, Evan is just a genius.
That's the one piece we took away from there. Is the sleeve element,
This sounds like this Evan guy knows what he's doing. You're saying he made this lineup, and then you guys were like, okay, these are all things we need to do. Okay, so Willem, I'm curious. These are kind of the very earliest foundations, and I know that your role as I believe a 3D character artist would kind of like most emphatically be a little bit later in the pipeline of the kind of art progression. But can you speak at all to like how the evolution began from that earliest kind of concept roots?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, at the beginning of the ideation process, we tend to seed ideas. So we pull ideas from across different pods, different artists across the studio, sometimes from Skin's team and Champ Up, and try to find.
Is that related to like the mood boards and stuff that I've seen, and like the 3 pillars, or is
it
that
helps in the construction of that?
Okay,
yeah.
So in the ideation process, the design, narrative, and art teams kind of pull together some image reference, maybe some pillars that we can build around, some story sketches, and we kind of push those around until we settle on something that we can all kind of get behind. And
it's a strong collaboration between the 3 primary disciplines: art, narrative, design.
Okay.
It's a constant back and forth reinforcement. Narrative will design or strengthen the narrative elements of the character, and then art will come back and inform that until we find something that we feel is very well aligned with one another. So once we have that nugget, once we found that Stoneflower direction, at that point we're refining the character until we feel like we have something that is unique, that doesn't cross over any other existing champions. And is something that is uniquely League of Legends.
That's what I was waiting for.
Yeah.
I was like, I know this is coming.
That's the line.
We can't just make a dragon. He has to be a League of Legends dragon.
Right?
You know?
It's very important because we want it to be uniquely ours.
Yeah, it needs to fit in. Like at this point, we've iterated enough on the visual style. Like again, we've had a whole nother go at the base map that it's important that it all looks like it fits together. You know, we've had that issue before of like, holy, how are these 2 guys in the same game? This guy's flying a freaking like UFO and
Rufflecopter.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the actual term?
Yeah, the reconnaissance. I forget what.
You're kidding me.
No. This is true. In Corky's law, he's reconnaissance something frontline copter.
Oh my
He's
god.
actually in a rufflecopter.
God bless early League of Legends.
God bless.
Just
yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, cool. Thanks for that insight. So we talking to Willem, not you, Daniel.
Yeah, I know.
God, get out. Okay, so we've got kind of that early. It sounds like the spark is there, kind of early in the art, and I imagine obviously some of the details of her, kind of her background and gameplay start flowing from those things as well. What kind of took the next lead? What did the story start to flesh itself out immediately, or gameplay, or kind of together?
So I joined Blue Pod. I joined Riot like a couple weeks, I guess, into Taliyah's ideation, and I remember the first image I saw of Taliyah was one that Evan did, but not the Stoneflower one. but of a girl sitting in the middle of what looked like woven stone, kneeling, and she had this very like kind of dark skin, and she just looked like she was from the desert. And I was like, okay, great, and she had these very textile-driven clothes, and I said, well, maybe she like weaves stone, and I think it's starting to build off of that image and like, why would she weave stone? Where did she come from? Like, like what are her people like? And, where did this power come from? All built from an image and then just starting to go off of that. And I think I did a couple of like story sketches and then trying to just see how she would interact in the world and what kind of personality she had.
I love that idea. I've heard about this recently where it's basically kind of like you do like just, I mean, you said sketches, but yeah, like that's the thing is it's just like some like concept-y kind of like doodling almost, but from a narrative sense where it's just figuring out like, okay, what might work, what might not, like what feels good.
It's such a long time until we can actually get a 3D model rigged, ready for animation, and effects that go into that. And words can go a lot faster than that at the very beginning. So
that's a good point.
It's a good place for us to be able to hear kind of like what her voice sounds like, how she interacts with the world, how does she move, like what does she manipulate, what does she think about other people, how does she internalize everything that's around her. And I think that when the team reads those kind of things, they can either agree with it and we write new ones, or they can say, oh, this is totally it. And, when they go to do the animation, there's something to work off of. If they go to do, it informs what her hairstyle looks like and what color her clothes are and that kind of thing. So it's just like a piece of concept art, only it's made with words.
That's awesome. Go ahead.
There was actually one specific point where the narrative side of things really helped to define the visuals. Early on, Ariel did a comic script, right? That told her base story. Like, it was one of the first pieces of narrative work that we got for Taliyah, and very easy to digest because it was just line by line. The whole pod read that and instantly got a very clear idea of who this character would end up being, and that drove us. From that point on, it drove us in a specific direction. I think some of the things that you defined in there was that she was from a nomadic tribal village, that she was a weaver by trade. And there was a very interesting nugget in there that I think we really kind of held on to throughout production, which was that she sees the world through the lens as a weaver. And that because she found this source of power, this extremely powerful control over the element of rock, she wouldn't just throw out chunks of rock. She's an artist, and the only way that she knows to create is by weaving. So naturally, she would take that medium of stone and weave it in the only way that she knows how. That felt really powerful, and it felt very unique. And that's sort of what makes her our version of a stone mage rather than just a generic stone mage.
Yeah, if Taliyah had been born in a city surrounded by people, maybe she would have built like great architecture, big city walls or things like that. But because her family and her parents and her people were weavers and nomads, like she's going to process that concept of magic in a completely different way. And I think that was the thing that kind of made her endearing to us, is this concept of this girl who's just trying to get a hold of the power that's within, and the only way she can do that, the only way she can parse her own power is through the teachings of her people.
Man, that's really awesome. I can't wait to see that in action. One of the cool things that you kind of helped me realize during that is, as we talk a lot on these podcasts and really everywhere about like obviously how we lavish so much more love, attention, and detail into champions these days as opposed to 5 years ago when we were slamming them out like every 2 weeks. And I guess I hadn't thought much more deeply about that in that a lot of that goes into that long-term art pipeline. Like you as say like a technical artist or the splash artist or the 3D character artist, kind of there's almost like a chain going on where like the previous part needs to get done before then the texturing can happen and all of that. And because we're putting so much more technical detail into all that work, there's kind of a longer timeline there in which the designer and the writer can be kind of iterating on what you're doing, which is really cool because it means we get more story. So I know we've already seen a little bit of that with Taliyah, and I believe there's more to come. So I'm really excited along those lines.
So during the time that this is going on, I would be working on what you call prototypes. So I cobble together from existing assets in the game something that we can play.
Oh, we've seen that, yeah, where it's
Yeah.
like, I remember in the old company playtest days where we'd have like some new thing and it'd be like a red colored version of some other champion that we thought would be vaguely reminiscent, and then we'd have random ability icons and stuff like that.
Yep, I took,
Placeholder VFX, all that stuff.
I took Karma's model actually.
Karma,
and
okay,
cut
makes
off,
sense.
Cut off the wings thingies that she has.
Oh, we
there.
can do that now? Before it was just like, let's turn it green.
I opened the texture file and very inexpertly edited it. There was still
He's
like
learning.
Yes.
He's got some great texture
Willem
skills.
saw it and screamed in horror.
there was still like little bits and pieces floating that I couldn't find in the texture. I was like, it's close enough. And then I just,
It's okay if it bugs out every now and then.
yeah, of course. And her reveal is going to be out when this comes out, right?
Yes.
So I can talk about her abilities.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So her Q threaded volley, she throws out a bunch of rocks, right? And those used to be just literally a Nivea E's that are just loaded up in paint.net, colorized, brown, safe, done.
Dang, that probably looked pretty scary.
It looked pretty dumb.
Okay,
it got lost a lot and nobody could see where the missiles were. So it was, I remember I walked over to Evan and one was like, hey, Evan, I have these placeholder things. Nobody can see where they are. They can't dodge them. What's a better color than brown?
Gotcha.
And Evan was like, orange. And that worked out.
There you go.
Yeah. That's why we need artists.
What was the foundational part of the kit? Like, I feel like a lot of time there's like, oh, the passive came to mind first, or this, like, we built it around the W, like, or Brahms shielding and things
She
like
had
that.
a pretty solid kit from the get-go, but I think the thing that really started to coalesce her character was when her passive and her ult kind of started to kind of get that overlap. When the surfing came up, then everybody was like, holy shit, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, from the very beginning, we had a couple of starting points. We actually had a prototype kit that had been kicking around for a while that we called Terrain Mage.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
That's a while back.
That's a while back. Yeah, Max Ma, a former writer, was working on that. And Terrain Mage did a couple of really cool things, including Terrain Mage had this one ability where he had a skill shot that could be empowered by ripping parts of a wall out and
Gotcha.
throwing them at the enemy. So his gameplay was all about finding a fresh piece of wall that he could rip out and throw at the enemy. And there were issues with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it was very, very binary in terms of, I'm sorry, that's designer language. Depending on where you were, that skill was either very powerful or very weak. Like if you're in the middle of mid lane and there's no wall anywhere around you, that skill isn't great. If you're fighting in the jungle, oh my God, there's walls everywhere. So I remember I actually started, the very first thing I put in was, I wanted to do a spin on that ability. I thought maybe she could create some walls for herself to use for that ability too.
Was that a pun? Spin?
It is now.
Are we starting the
It's
pun?
unconscious now.
The puns have begun.
It has begun.
Flee now.
Yeah.
Flee, listeners.
And I remember it was like, oh God, this is going to be so hard to detect the edge of a wall properly and to decide how I want to slice walls and everything. So before I do that, just so we have something in playtesting, I'm going to submit this like placeholder ability where she rips up the ground instead of the walls around her. And it's like, nobody's going to like that. It's probably dumb. It just puts a bunch of circles on the ground. Where's the gameplay in that? And then everybody loved it. From the very first play, it was like, this was so cool. I was always looking out for new, fresh ground. And then Ariel told me, like, that makes a lot of sense for her as a nomad to be somebody who keeps wanting to move to fresh ground. I was like, maybe that's the spell I should be making.
League of Legends champion design. Happy accidents.
Imagine a dog in a lab coat and I have no idea what I'm doing.
This is going to be terrible. Daniel, we love this. You're a genius. Yes,
I planned
am.
this. Exactly.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I can definitely imagine. That makes a lot of sense that this crazy ultimate, as well as that very unique passive, would kind of be those things where it's like, okay, we see this starting to come together.
Those came in, I would say, late relative to the rest of the kit.
Okay.
But still early relative to when kits normally finish.
Sure. But that's where it started putting smiles on people's faces, is what it sounded like. Okay.
I remember the first time we saw the alt on the art side. When we first saw the iteration of the alt, Daniel had just put it in for a play test.
Did this have a placeholder view?
Yeah, of course.
What was it?
A Nivea wall chunks.
Yeah.
So color brown.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Thanks to Nivea.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That was the moment where we all collectively looked at it and said, oh, okay, this is something that we can all get behind. And the excitement
This is the next
elevated
league champ.
dramatically.
Okay.
Yeah, we could sort of see the vision for the final
Gotcha.
at that point.
That's super cool.
The passive then came after that, right?
Yeah, the passive came after that. We had a bunch of passives that just didn't do anything for her. I wanted to say, hey, maybe you get to the wall and your next auto attack is strong. It's like, nah, you don't really want to auto attack. You're a mage, right? Until I realized, moving fast along walls is already fun. We knew this because for last preseason, one of the members of Live design team was spiking an exploration of different boots. So instead of enchants, you could get different types of boots. And one of the types, and most of them didn't test well. There was one that tested really well. They were called terrain boots. And all they did was give you a bunch of movement speed when you're near terrain. It was like, I'm stealing that. And that's basically how most of our champions get made. I'm stealing something from here.
There's a lot of
something from
stealing.
there.
You're the best champ designer I've ever met.
I make all of my own things.
He knows how to make good acquisitions.
Didn't you even inherit Lucian from someone else?
There may have been a gunslinger kid before. Yes. The only thing I can actually claim on Lucian is the R. That's the only thing I designed. And I liked it so much, I put it on Taliyah again.
What?
Yeah, her Q is Lucian's R.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Power creep.
Sorry. This guy. Sorry. It's so nice.
Visionary
I
champ
designed it twice.
design from Daniel Z. Klein.
Right. The passive was another one of those was like, I don't know what to, I know I want to give her something near terrain. Terrain boots were kind of cool. I know they were fun. Let's just throw that in there and then later on add something else. And it turned out that something else that we needed to add to the passive wasn't gameplay at all. It was a sweet rock surfboard.
Yes,
Once
exactly.
that came in, people were like,
Once you have the
my
swag,
God.
you're good to go.
Yeah.
And it was thematically similar to the alt. So it started creating a sort of a foundation there. You started getting a sense of her personality. She's playful, right? She likes to explore. So both of those things actually reinforce the thematic that we were looking for on her. So I don't know if you want to...
I have one thing I have to say is that this style of it's funny. I've heard for different champions you have a different role that the ult will play, and this sounds like one of the turning it up to 11 ults where it's like, I can always kind of do this, but now I can really do this. Okay, sorry, that's enough for me and my amateur design. You were saying?
Oh no, I think for us as a champion pod, we were really just interested also in making this human girl, like somebody who didn't have a tortured past. Or parents weren't killed in a shower of blood, just trying to remove as much darkness that's kind of inherent in a lot of league champions' upbringings.
It's almost edgy how much she isn't edgy.
Normcore, I think is the term.
She has a family that cares about her very much, and I think that's actually one of the harder things is that what do you do to keep the people that you love safe? Like, what are you willing to give up? And I think for her, she's willing to sacrifice that love, that the people that she cares for, to gain control of this magic. And I think that was really powerful for me to have this girl go out on her own and try and find that. It wasn't something I had really seen before in League, at least.
So this is actually something we aligned around early on in ideation. We all wanted to make a younger girl. We hadn't made a girl in this age bracket, like 16-ish, we're saying, right?
Yeah, she's about 16.
How old is Alawi? You mentioned
is probably late 30s.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, sorry. Interesting segue. I don't usually think like, yes, that's okay, go ahead.
And we wanted to make a girl that has a positive mindset, that's optimistic about things. And we immediately got some amount of concern from people outside of the team where it was like, well, is she just going to be like brain dead, Barbie-ish? Is this going to be, no offense to Lux players, just another Lux, right? Because as much as I love Lux, the champion, and there's some really fun things to do with her in the game, it is true that she can be pretty single note.
Yeah, one note. I think that the interesting thing is that
high-pitched as hell,
when you say like, we're going to make a positive young girl, a consensus of opinion is like, they're only going to be bubbly and one note positive. And I think that was the thing is that let's find somebody who's got depth. Like, she's got reasons because of what she's doing and where she's going and who she meets and we're trying to make her as much of a real person as possible.
Gotcha.
I think
And,
the
and that's where Ariel steps in.
Yeah.
Flesh that out a bit.
The pillar that you used was optimistic grit or something like that?
Defiant optimism.
Defiant
was one of that.
optimism,
I think
that
her
was it,
pillars
yeah.
are taming wild magic and youthful heart adult troubles.
Sure, and I mean she may be optimistic, but she's still growing up in the desert as part of a caravan. She's not in some ivory castle or
Yeah,
anything
and
like that.
she's seen some of the world. I mean, I think that she's probably one of our more well-traveled Valorans in terms of
Sure.
like being able to see. She grew up in Shrima. She's been to Noxus. She's been in Ionia. Like we hint at some Freljord stuff. Like she's seen some
S.
stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There we go. Gotcha. One thing, just to totally segue, one thing I have to talk about is I'm always intrigued by the tech that goes into things. Ever since I talked to, I believe, Rory Alderton about Yasuo back in the day, and he's like, "Well,
The sword sheathing.
yeah, the sword
Oh,
sheathing,
my
and
God.
the hair wasn't moving, so we just had to make some new stuff for it, and stuff
Yeah.
like that." And I'm curious, in this case, you had to not only do the earth mage thing, you had to do it in a very particular way that sounds difficult as hell. When we're talking about weaving and very graceful, you're talking graceful, you're talking earth. That doesn't seem to match up at all. What was that like, having to visualize the art for that? Was it as challenging as it sounds?
There was a lot of challenges around that. So that is where we have a phase of development. After we have the core idea, sort of the nugget, we go into a phase called pre-production. Mm-hmm. At that point, we have a general sense of where we want to head, but we haven't solved anything yet. To get the look for the particles, we spent a lot of time doing research and development on the VFX side, VFX being the particle effects, spell effects in the game. Mm-hmm. A lot of concept explorations, which would then be thrown over to the particle artist to test out in the game to see how it looks when it's moving around. So a lot of collaboration went into that, and that was probably the largest single art challenge that we had to face.
Oh, for sure, I can imagine.
Because, like you said, we wanted to. One thing that we noted with Taliyah's design is that there was a lot of the kit that spoke to motion, right? She spins with the Q, and there's a cadence to the rock she throws out. The minefield that she lays out, there's a bunch of rocks that come out in a pattern. We wanted to get that rhythmic sense of weaving represented in her character, and so as she took form, we realized she was actually a very graceful, fluid character, and we liked the juxtaposition of the fluid rhythmic elements in both of her kit and her animations, and how that contrasted with the element that she uses, which is stone. So she ends up being this very graceful character that uses a very plodding type of something you associate with being really plodding,
mm-hmm.
Like heavy stone. But the beauty is that we were able to still capture the feeling of heavy rock impacting with characters, right?
Sure.
It's not just
so on the receiving end, it's
right.
it's much less
It
graceful.
still feels impactful, and you can really tell the knock up. There's some punch to it. When you cast the alt, you can feel the weight of the rocks as they push out of the earth.
Graceful coming out of her hand, not so much when it hits that Darius.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And finding that balance is a lot of iteration.
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, that just sounds like it would just take a lot of iteration over and over. Because I know like making sure everything appears hand painted and very personal in that way is a huge part of what we do. So I imagine there was a lot of okay, let's do it again, once more with feeling.
A lot of paint overs, yeah.
Sure. Okay, cool. So we've talked a ton about the development. Now, we're at the point where this thing's going to be rolling out, and I kind of want to just get into that a little bit. So, what does she mean for the world? Ariel is what I'm always one of my first questions. Is obviously you mentioned, I believe she's Shuriman. How does she add to it?
Well, I think we get a better picture as to kind of what Shurima is, what it was, and what it is now.
Average girl with the supernatural powers.
Yeah, I think the thing is that we've had a lot of kind of disparate narrative type events or stories and stuff of different places. And for me, Taliyah was a way to kind of explain a little bit of that and kind of connect some of those dots. We had, the tale of Azir Rising. Mm-hmm. I mean, somebody who's been dead or out of the picture for at least, a millennia or something like that. the desert probably flourished while he was gone with people. They didn't all leave. So what happened to those people?
Something besides the Rek'Sais that are out there eating people?
Well, Rek'Sai has somebody to eat, right?
Let's explore the tale of that sad caravan guy who got eaten in Rek'Sai's story.
But I think to just not drop those things completely and go back to that and say, all right, well, if these people are here and somebody comes back, and what does that mean? How do people feel about that? They don't know that Azir was going to free the slaves. Everybody died in Shurima. Like the only person who knows that is Xerath, and I don't think he's going to be saying anything anytime soon about that.
It's like, hey guys, you thought I was a myth and I was gone for a few thousand years, but I'm back now and I'm your emperor, so the order is given, I guess. I would not be best pleased if I was.
There's got to be some people.
Yeah. And I think that one of the stories that ended up being that I wrote that ended up being part of her promotional launch stuff was the Bird and the Branch story. Mm-hmm. And I had just gotten to Riot, and at that point I had asked my team, I was like, well, what kind of story do you want to see? And I think somebody, the lead for champion team, Ryan Vernier, was like, I would really like to see like a samurai and a snow story. And I was like, great. All right. Well, Yasuo. All right. Let's see what I can do with that. And
did he really say a samurai and an X story?
No, a samurai in the snow. He was just, I don't even remember very much of the conversation, but it was just that jumping off point. And I thought about it, and, like Taliyah needs to learn how to control these very elemental powers, and she would probably hook up with an elemental mage of some variety who knew how to control those types of things. So I wrote a story about the two of them, and it ended up being that we got to release it for the promo, and so I got to kind of see where she started, and then to get them parted and her back to Shurima. But I hope that it got to expand Yasuo's character a little bit, that he wasn't just such a, a couple words I guess I could describe Yasuo from the fans and stuff. I hope it humanized him a little bit more.
Well, I mean, it's just the bigger, like, Runeterra is so big, and we want it to be even bigger, and just and that's been a long-term effort for the last a couple of years, and you even mentioned it with her. It's like, okay, well, there's Shurima. Oh shoot, who actually lives there? Well, we should probably flesh that out. And it's a long-term effort. We're doing that in this case, and it's really cool, as you mentioned, that yeah, we can be linking other champions in. I know that's something we were doing with Burning Tides as well. It was really cool. Oh my gosh, TF and Graves, they're going to interact and hang out. How awesome is that?
We can't link like 50 champions together, but we certainly could do one or two, and as long as they had a good reason for that we could build off of. And I think that that gave us a lot of at least me when I was writing the VO script, a lot of insight of how can I connect her more to the world around her, to champs. Like she would have strong feelings about Noxus and Ionians and other Shurimans, and just giving that back to the players and trying to make our world just a little bit more cohesive is why I'm on the team. So
it's also something that players have asked for a lot. And we shouldn't always give players everything they ask for, because sometimes they don't know what they really want. Gotta save
something for 6 months down the line.
Yes, that as well. But that's a big one. Another one I think that you handled really well in that story is people often ask, what would actual abilities and actual fight look like in the lore? And we have this beautiful, beautiful part in the end where Taliyah knocks the captain of the guard up and Yasuo presses R.
Oh!
Yeah. Spoilers. Yeah. That's what you get for not having read the story yet, Dylan.
Yeah. At the time we recorded this, I hadn't read the story yet. Yeah. That's my bad. Okay, I'm real stoked for that, because that was actually one of my favorite things about the Mount Targon story stuff is Pantheon Grand Sky falling off of the freaking mountain into the middle of the guys. I was like, okay, I need to go play Pantheon right now. And it's a fun thing when we did the podcast for that, and Ant Reynolds was like, yes, that's what we're trying to get for, because that's the thing is in the end, League of Legends is a game, and we want it to be a very supported game and all the stuff around it, but ideally these things should all make you be like, yes, I want to be this person.
I think most of her kit is represented in that story, so I mean, like, that was really important to me to make sure that I would talk to Daniel and say, like, am I getting this right? Is this how you see it? Because sometimes when we're writing that stuff, we don't have the animations yet, or we don't have the effects yet, and that it becomes this weird interconnected circle where we all kind of feed off of each other.
Sure, that's awesome.
Although Reddit does think that she uses a sling in her auto attack.
Sorry.
So,
She's moved on from the sling. That's actually what happened.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, she's learned that she doesn't need the sling.
No longer needs the sling.
There we go.
So on the gameplay front, what are we expecting in terms of her hitting live? It seems like there's a little, like, we haven't done, I think one of the key things is that she's going to be more of a control mage, which is something we haven't quite seen as much of recently.
The modern word is disruptor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have a whole vocabulary.
I'll need to refresh myself on that dev blog.
Yes. It's a very good dev blog.
That has like 10 terms to remember.
It's not so bad.
No, it's really good. I mean, those are guiding principles is the thing.
Yeah.
We want they help us internally think, okay, all right, here's the idea to keep to, and then externally for players to know what to expect as well.
They help us judge what is appropriate and isn't appropriate for character classes as well. So if I'm saying, hey, I'm a disruptor, and by the way, I'm also super tanky and I never die. I'm like,
well, they hold you.
Right.
I believe they were specifically designed to hold you back a little bit because you know
personally,
you're so enthusiastic
Daniel,
about your champions. You really want them to just be able to do everything.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I mean,
yes, normally they do. So she is a disruptor with a twist of burst mage. We haven't talked about all the abilities in here, but one of the things she does is she puts down a minefield that only blows up if you dash through it. It's an interesting take on Poppy's W. Poppy's W actually stops dashes. In Taliyah's case, she says, no, I'm not going to stop you. Feel free to dash.
Do you feel lucky, punk?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Are you prepared to suffer for your dash?
I love it. All these new ways we're punishing the mobility and stuff like that.
That's what we're doing.
I'm a big fan.
But then, of course, as we do with modern kits, we have something called a self setup in there. If the enemy doesn't have a dash, it's like, oh, my minefield is never going to do anything to them. Like, no, you can W them through it. That counts as a dash.
A self setup, much like Yasuo has. Maybe she learned it from him.
Q3.
The lore nerd in me is
it's quite,
something.
It's quite possible.
I don't know the verb there, but it's great.
Geeky now.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
No, self-setters are important as a baseline, right?
Gotcha.
If your spell is super powerful against people with dashes but does literally nothing if they don't have one, then depending on who you play against, you may have a great game or a really poor game. And this way, if you lane against, let's say, a Malzahar,
knock him through the minefield.
You knock him through the minefield. There you go. And that's where she gets a little bursty, because if you can only damage an enemy from a maximum of 4 mines that they touch as you knock them through. But if she does hit the full 4 mines, she doubles the damage that her E does. And that's bursty.
And as we've seen from many Gragas YouTube videos at this point, people love using one ability to knock enemies into your other ability. It's just immediately YouTubeable.
Gragas, Tristana, Alistair, all of those people are going to enjoy playing with Taliyah because they can just force people through the minefield.
Sure. So leading into my next question, how was she during playtesting in terms of power level? I hear a lot of stories sometimes where people are just like, this guy's trash, it's not going to work out. Other times where they're just a freaking terror for months on hand internally. Where was she on the power level?
This is a very exciting one because we don't know where she's going to end up. We never know.
Great.
We never know.
Can't go wrong.
She's been actually surprisingly middle of the road.
Okay.
She has a couple of skills that are pretty hard to learn, things we call unique inputs.
Oh, okay.
So stuff that you have to learn that's champion specific. So her Q, keeping that on enemies moving around, placing her E and tossing people through it with a W, knowing when to ride your wall, when not to ride your wall. You can choose whether or not you want to ride the wall. And for everybody who's listening to this, who is going to get it wrong the first time they play, I'm just going to say this right now. Press the button once. If you don't want to ride, just press it twice quickly. Don't even wait to ride. That's the biggest thing people still get wrong.
They probably still will. I still will. Yes. I guarantee it.
Yeah. So there is a good learning curve. I would hope it's not an Azir learning curve.
I was about to say.
It
Sounds like it'll be some, but maybe not quite the Azir level of you pretty much auto lose the first time you play Azir.
It shouldn't. Yeah, like 35% or so for your first Azir game. That's not cool. It shouldn't be as bad as Aurelion either, because Aurelion's positioning demands are very, very hard.
And there again, it's just so unique, like you said. Wait, I can't hide in the bush?
Yeah, exactly. She has games where people that have played her like 20 times or so are doing very well now, to the point where I'm getting a little worried. But then we pull in like somebody who is master rated on League, and he plays his first game with Taliyah and he goes 0-10-0, and I'm like, what do I do? So what we do, Dylan, and this is an important thing that I've learned after 3 years of champion design, we use the only test environment that gives us any good feedback.
life.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. And that's the
Very
fun.
passionate, loud feedback.
Yeah, that's the thing we always try. We're telling you players, like, we will continue iterating on this. Don't.
Yes, of course. We're never done. Never done.
Yeah. I think with her, there's going to be really interesting as well with all those unique inputs that, like, when I'm playing against her for the first time, I'm also not going to have any idea what's going on. So we'll all be happy newbies together with her.
And once you've played against her a bunch of times, you can actually look at where the ground is worked. I guess we haven't mentioned this yet. Her Q works the ground. So
yeah.
Yeah, it rips up the ground, turns it pretty. She gets a bit of movement speed on that worked ground, but her Q becomes very, very weak on it. So she will want to step off the worked ground to use a powerful Q. And once you've played against her a couple of times, at least this is my hope, you can get into her mind. And you can anticipate where the Taliyah player will want to step to be powerful against you. And maybe you're placing your Cho'Gath Rupture right there, and then you eat her.
Does the ground stay worked permanently?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. All right. That's a long time,
That's
especially
a
if you're just
very
hanging
long
around in mid lane.
Yep, you can eat up all that mid lane if you're not careful.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, man. And it's also not a one-way decision as well, because while your Q gets weaker on the work ground, isn't it also cheaper?
It is half mana cost, and you get that movement speed over worked ground. So what we see sometimes is people like creating a corridor of worked ground from the tower to the middle of the lane, and then they stay on that corridor for farming, because you can still farm with the weak Q. And if they need to fight, they step off it. If they get ganked, they use the corridor to run back to their tower.
That's so interesting. She can have such a different, like, you can kind of opt into one pattern or the other. Oh man. Doing a great job on this, guys. I'm excited.
Entirely planned, totally not a placeholder ability I was looking to.
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay, yeah. We gotta remember that.
I'm a genius.
Happy accidents.
I'm a genius.
Okay, well, that's awesome. I don't have any more immediate questions offhand. Are there any other things that you folks are particularly excited to see come out, or like cool little stories or tidbits you'd like to share?
I want to talk about two things that I'm going to regret talking about because people are going to yell at me why I didn't give it to them. There were two things we tried with the alt. So one of the things that we explored early on that we kind of moved away from a little bit is just haven't entirely moved away from it. Taliyah is not fully in control over her power. So
still developing.
Her training was cut short.
We
reference Star Wars Episode 5 a lot. This is Luke feeling unready, leaving his training early, right? This is the moment in the end of Bird on the Branch. And Yasuo tells her, you're not ready. You're risking your life for your family if you leave right now. And she's like, yep, that's what I'm doing. So that's what she says, right?
You are correct.
Yeah. So we wanted to have some abilities that feel like she's just barely in control. And some of that is the WE combo. Some of that is keeping the Q on people. You're like struggling to keep it on. But the biggest part where I did that, where I went really big, was with the ultimate. And it used to be the ultimate is this very long wall. It used to be she didn't ride it. She would just stand there and make the wall. But as she's creating the wall, imagine it's like a missile that pulls a wall behind itself. She could curve it.
Interesting.
And it was really hard to get the right curves, and you felt like you were wrestling with this primal force of no, go there, wall, go there. We moved away from the curving for a bunch of reasons. There were just too many inputs at that point if I wanted to let you ride it and also curve it.
Pretty dang crazy.
But I ended up finding a really simple way to make up for that, where she's just a little bit too fast currently in riding the alt for you to really feel in control of when you jump off the wall. You're like, I want to kind of get there, but oh my God, it's so fast, it's all happening.
That's so cool that you guys are, not only are you are designing a kit appropriate to her identity, it's also like literally how old and in control of her power she is. That's such a cool thing.
You definitely want, you want the kit for the player to feel as much like her or as much in the world as she is. And I think that, for me, her barely contained power, I think that it's a joy to use, but it's also scary as hell.
Got you.
The magic word there is thematic cohesion.
Oh, these buzzwords.
I've heard that before.
Oh.
Yeah. That's something that we always hold up as a guiding principle. We try to make the art, the narrative, and the design all play nicely together so that you look at one and the others make sense.
Mm-hmm. Like when I play Teemo and I feel truly satanic.
Exactly.
It is achieved in that point. Okay.
It's just you.
All right. So as sad as some players might be about that, I think in the end they'll be okay because let's be real, you get to surf.
But the other one that they're going to be a little bit sadder about, because the other thing we tried before we even had the alt wall, there's an ability that I've always wanted to do. I had a kit way back in 2013 that had that ability on it. What it was basically, her ultimate was she could select one piece of one chunk
chunk of terrain. So however big that chunk of terrain is, everything that terrain touches, and that would go away for 30 seconds.
What the heck?
Art nightmares, by the way.
I'm fairly certain Summoner's Rift is a singular piece. Like it's like one big painting.
Sort of.
It's
complicated.
It was very complicated to get it to work, and it was a very interesting and exciting idea.
Yeah.
And when we experiment with it, we could get the technology to work on the gameplay side. On the art side, one of the reasons why we moved away from it is the amount of rework we would have to do to the actual map was substantial.
Yeah.
And
from the crazy mind of Z. Klein.
But that's not actually the reason we gave it up, though.
There are different reasons too, but that was a contributing factor.
What was the real reason?
So
it better be good.
Art and technology are definitely two very big up there. Like we would have had to delay her for a half year or so to get the work done, and that's not a thing we wanted to do. But it's also not a mage ability, it turns out. This is a support ability, or maybe an ability that Monday might want to live on an item or summon a spell. I don't know. Like no promises, and like I said, the challenges are
just like
huge.
you stole the terrain boots.
Man.
It's in there in the toolbox.
It's a give and take. Exactly. You joke about the toolbox, but we have this set of abilities that we know are good for the game that need to happen at some point, and whoever is the first person to make them fit on a kit just gets to do it. My W, Seismic Shove, is an ability we used to call Rupture Toss for the longest time. And Rupture Toss is something that we had in a kit all the way back in January 2014 for an Azir prototype exploration that August Browning worked on.
Okay,
and
that's Gypsy Lord.
Yeah, he's been pitching that ability to everyone who will listen and people who will not listen as well. It's that and Sunstrike for him. And
use my ability.
Yes. He finally broke me down and he got me to use it. No, I stole his brilliant idea. So we do have that toolkit, and I think wall destruction or like terrain destruction. Imagine they're doing Baron Pit, you're standing behind Baron Pit, and you just make the wall around Baron Pit go away.
Sure.
And everything just becomes place, like terrain you can fight on. So that terrain destruction is definitely going in that toolkit of someday this is coming to League.
Gotcha. And I think fortunately players probably won't mind too much because again, surfing. And then also like thematic cohesion style, I think the current one is a little more that whole weaving aspect we talked about than simply making stuff disappear. So folks, we really hope you've enjoyed the coverage so far for Taliyah. And there's going to be more coming down the line. And really want to just thank all of you three for coming out here, as well as the other artists and members of the pod who couldn't be here as well. Any particular shout outs? You can troll them if you want.
I got to shout out the entire art team. There's a lot of talented guys that worked on this with us. So Evan Montiero, Hing Chui, we've got Nick Matthews, Jason Kaiser. That's the art guys.
Nerds, a lot of them.
They're amazing dudes, and we work together really well on this. So they all kicked ass on this.
Okay, awesome. And of course, Daniel Klein has no one to thank because he is the singular genius.
Everything sprung fully formed from my mind. Yes.
I think he should probably be thanking our engineers.
I should.
Guys.
Actually, this is very true. Actually, we have staffed up in engineering a lot recently, and Amelia Van Hayden was the engineer in the beginning of Taliyah's process. It's Kevin Bora who saw her through to the end, but she made that prototype to destroy walls in like a week. It's like, oh god, you could do that.
We have specific staffing needs to meet your crazy mind on these things. Okay, that's pretty good.
That's how it works.
I'm imagining actually with that whole tearing thing, a pretty funny thing now. Back when the work was going on the latest look for Summoner's Rift, I think somebody ripped the whole skin off and like hung it in just kind of a black background, and they realized that there's just a Baron hanging out underneath, like just sitting there waiting to emerge, and he was just kind of like hanging in black space. And I'm imagining tearing a hole in the ground and then screaming in fear because there's a Baron staring back at you.
That would be pretty terrifying.
Yeah, on that terrifying note, I think we're going to wrap things up. So just again, want to thank all the members of the pod and you three in particular for coming out here. Folks, let us know what you thought of the podcast, and make sure to like, subscribe us, let us know what we could do better, what you liked, all that kind of stuff. And other than that, let's get out there, and can't wait to see how you enjoy Taliyah, and we'll be back next time. Take care.
All right, see you guys later.
Yep, bye.
Say bye, Daniel.
No.
Okay, well, bye, folks.